This week on Another Thing, should college athletes be paid? We talk with an attorney representing the athletes who are trying to unionize. Dawn talks with a man who uses personal tragedy to save the lives of others. And my commentary this week is on the lessons of Baltimore. I'm Larry Menti. Welcome to Another Thing. The NCAA makes close to $1 billion a year in profit. Some of the top college coaches in the country make millions of dollars a year. Student athletes don't think that's fair. And at Northwestern University, some of the athletes want to unionize. Their case is now making its way through the courts. So is that a good thing or a bad thing for college athletics? Let's start our coverage of this issue with Ellen Kaloje. Ellen.
Here at Drexel University and on every campus in this country, you'll find people with different opinions about whether college athletes should be paid. On one hand, people say, hey, they already do get paid. Many of them get free tuition, free room and board, and free textbooks, and that's enough. Others say, hold on, the kids who bring in millions of dollars to the big-time athletic programs should share in some of the profits.
If we understand that we're really talking about a labor force that has not been compensated appropriately and a business industry that has been built on that labor, then we can begin to unlock the reasons why it's important that we begin to be making adjustments in this college sport model.
Do you see that happening?
Well, I think that there is a tremendous amount of contention about this right now, but I do hope that it will happen sooner rather than later.
Sooner, perhaps, because of football players at Northwestern University who voted to start a union. A judge said they could, but the school is appealing with the National Labor Relations Board. Drexel professor Ellen Starowski says athletes should be considered employees, even though many schools say they just don't have the money.
That's a classic labor argument, and we hear it from the NFL every time that there's a labor dispute. We hear it from Major League Baseball, the NHL. Every time that there's a discussion about labor issues, you hear the exact same argument. The system is not likely to do the right thing until they get sued. So having an outside entity that advocates on behalf of the players will help to level the playing field in terms of the interests of the athletes involved.
Now, some of the major colleges do plan to give some of their athletes a stipend or thousands of dollars to spend however they want. But some critics say that's still not enough and that the star athletes should be able to do endorsements and sell autographs, but there's a lot of resistance to that plan. Reporting for Another Thing, I'm Ellen Kaloje.
All right, thank you, Ellen. Now to continue our conversation on the way NCAA athletes are treated and whether or not they should unionize, we are joined by Jason Beltzer, Esquire, who is president of Game Inc. and a professor of sports law at Rutgers University. But you have some dogs in this fight as well.
I do. So I am an attorney that represents college coaches, first and foremost. So I represent about 24 college basketball, football coaches. Some of the guys and girls that are making millions of dollars from the college athletics machine. And I am also counsel for CAPA, which is the association that helped push Northwestern football to unionize this past year.
And where is that case now?
We're still waiting on a decision regarding from the NLRB to determine whether or not they have the right to unionize. But due to the O'Banian decision, which came down recently, we've already made some tremendous strides in the area of increasing student-athlete rights and pushing towards possible unionization.
The lower court has already said that they can go forward with this, right?
That's correct. And so over the last couple of weeks, we've seen schools reacting by putting out cost of attendance numbers and saying that we can now increase our supplementation of student-athlete incomes by up to $5,000, plus an additional $5,000 for rights and images. So now schools, particularly in larger conferences like Rutgers University or Penn State or Alabama, have the opportunity to give their student athletes up to an additional $10,000 in compensation every year.
It's interesting, everybody talks about the money, but when I looked at Northwestern and what they were asking for, money's low on the list.
It is.
They start off with, they want medical insurance.
That's right. So at this current time, if a student athlete is injured, say catastrophically on the field, the university really has no obligation to help with medical payments after the 2 or 3 years that they have left on their scholarships. So, for example, Eric LeGrand, who was hurt at Rutgers University, aside from the surgeries that he had to have initially for his spine, Rutgers has really no obligation to him once he stops playing. So Eric will have to spend millions upon millions of dollars in medical costs and living costs to be able to live with his paralysis, and Rutgers has no responsibility for that. And so one of the main reasons why Northwestern and their student athletes were pushed to unionize was to help bring medical coverage and basic rights to student athletes who are putting their bodies at risk on the football field.
I've heard John Calipari speak on this, who makes almost $6 million a year, by the way, at the University of Kentucky as their basketball coach, and he is for giving the student athletes more. He's talking about liability insurance. He said, most of my players go to the NBA. If they get hurt, they lose millions, but I can't pay for liability insurance. When they have big games, I can't fly their parents here, and their parents come from no means sometimes and can't get here themselves. But the NCAA has reacted to some of that. They've started to change their rules a little bit, haven't they not? They
have. So it's been a bit of a catch-22. When you talk about liability insurance, for example, student athletes previously had to take out loans against their future earnings to be able to pay for liability insurance in the event of an injury that hurt their draft stock. The problem is that most of those students come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and their families couldn't afford the insurance, period. So now the NCAA has created a new initiative that allows schools to basically pay the money forward as long as the student athlete promises to pay that back. So that's a step in the right direction, but it's something that should have been around for decades.
We're wrapping up, but I have a theory on this, and you tell me if I'm correct. I think the rules did work at one time. These rules that are in place did work at one time, but once it became a business and the big TV contracts and the conferences that were making so much money, those rules became outdated. And the NCAA never saw a need, because they were profiting so much, to change the rules. And so the Northwestern case really pushed them. And the rules will necessarily have to change one way or the other. What do you see happening now, and what should happen now?
I think we're going to see a continued push from student athletes to maybe not even just unionize, but to be able to establish their rights. Kappa is working on a couple of different initiatives that are going to shake up college athletics in a lot of different ways. But I think that eventually the Power 5 conferences, which are controlling 95% of the money, are going to start figuring out ways of making sure that their student athletes that are producing revenue are being compensated in a way that makes them happy and at least is equitable.
Very important point, because it is those conferences that seem to be pushing the NCAAs, maybe more so than the Northwestern students and the North Carolina students who now have a lawsuit. They're pushing and saying, look, we're going to change the rules with or without you.
That's correct.
And so you see the NCAA changing the rules dramatically over the next year?
I do. The NCAA works at the pleasure of its schools. And so if the schools that are controlling the money are saying that we want to head in this direction, the NCAA doesn't really have a choice but to follow them or be left in the dust, because these other universities can start their own association if they really want to.
Just a quick wrap up. So unionization may not be the answer, but a change of the rules absolutely does have to happen.
I think it's going to start pushing for a change in the rules, yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you joining me. Jason Beltzer, Esquire, President of Game Inc. and Professor of Sports Law at Rutgers University. When we come back, we're going to continue this discussion with a legendary athletic director from Princeton University when we continue with Another Thing.